Hi there once again and welcome to another Expresso mechanic tutorial. And in this one we're going to be looking at building this, which is of course a windscreen wiper rig. In order to achieve this we're going to be using a combination of Expresso, though not a great deal of it really, and also a couple of IK tags. And that's really all there is to this one. It's not as complicated as it may at first seem. But anyway, that's what we're about in this tutorial, so without further ado, let's see if we can make this happen. We'll begin by bringing in a cylinder. We'll orientate it +Z. Its radius will need to be 7. Its height we're going to make 1. Height segments 1 and rotation segments 60. Hit O so that we can take a look at the object. The caps I'll fillet and give them a fillet of 0.1. So they've just got a little bit of a fillet on. Okay, great, that's our first cylinder. I'll command drag to copy this, and with the second cylinder here, what I'm going to do is make this one a radius of 1, a height of 3, and leave the height segments and rotation segments exactly the same, and the caps exactly the same. I'll hit F2 to switch to my top view and hit H to see everything in the scene. And then we can see what we're doing here. Now we need to move this object. It can be done by eye really. We can just get a hold of the Z axis and just bring it forward until it lines up with about the middle of our original circle. And then what I'll do from here is go into my coordinates and we'll think about where we're going to place this along the X axis. We can probably place it at 3. In fact, we can go a little bit further. Let's go 4 and see if that works for us. It could be 4 or it could be 5, but we'll leave it at 4 at the moment. I think that'll be okay. In fact, no, I'll tell you what, I will do 5. Yeah, 5 is, I think, where it should be. Yeah, we'll leave it there. Okay, great. So we've got the first little piece of this done, and we can now think about what we're going to do next. So we'll switch to our front view, so F4, and just zoom a little bit closer to see where we are. And now we can think about adding the pivot points for our arms, which will carry the wiper blades. What I'm going to do here is copy this cylinder, but first I'm just going to group this into our main cylinder there, and I'll just copy this twice. And I'm going to do some renaming. I'll name the first one base L for left and base R for right. This we could rename if we wished. We can just say this is driver. Just call that driver. Okay, great. And now we can think about placing our two bases here. So our left one we need to bring over to our right because of course we're looking towards this from the audience's point of view, so everything is reversed. So we'll bring this up to here. I've got snapping on. I've got, let's have a look, see what I've got. I've got grid work plane and I've got point and line because it doesn't really make much odds. So my snapping's already on. And then base R here, I'm just going to move this one over to here. And there's now 10 squares between the two. I'll select both of them and we'll drag them over. In fact, I'll do it with this so that they still snap. We'll drag them over just to about there, and that should be set up pretty much as we'd like it in this particular view. So along the x-axis everything should be set up fine. If we just go back to our 3D view, we should see that that looks okay, and then we'll change to our top view and have a little bit of a look here and see what's going on. Well, for a start what we need to do is move these two back. So we'll move them back just about here for now. I mean, we can do some adjustments later on, but by eye we'll leave them there for now. So that's the first part of this set up. We've got our driver wheel and we've got our two pivot points for the arms in place. The next thing we need to do is create 2 more of these and set them up to create the joints that the arms, which will be connected to here and to both of these, we'll be using in order to make things move. So that's what we're about next. I'll hit F4 to switch to my front view, and then with base left and base right still selected, I'm just going to command drag to copy those two over here. And then all I'm going to do is drop them down by eye to about halfway between these 2 points, and then I'm just going to move them very, very slightly. I'm just going to take the snap off of this, just move them very, very slightly this way, so they're about there. Again, by eye is fine, and now they're positioned in effectively the positions that they need to be. They're about right now. If we go into our top view, so F2, what we've got to do next is make these bigger. So we need to make them taller. So our heights, we're going to make them 4. And I'm just going to bring them forward by eye until they're around here. In fact, what I'll do, I'll make them 5. They don't necessarily need to be this big, but I'm just going to do that for now. If I need to adjust it afterwards, I can. But I'm going to leave those at 5. Okay, that's all good. So hit H so that we can see everything again, and we've got all of our joints and pivot points and everything else set up ready for our arms. So the next thing we must do then is to actually create the arms. One thing I'm going to do before I go any further is group this into here and this into base R, and I'm simply going to rename these 1L and 1R. That's fine. That's all I need to do there. I'll hit F4 again, and we'll think about creating the first arm, which will be moving between here and here. That will join these 2 points together. That's what we need to do first. So what I'm going to do is bring in a rectangle. Its width, I'll make that 48.5. And if I need to do any adjustment, I'll do it. And I'll make it 3 in the height. I'll also make the rounding 1.5. We'll leave that as it is because it's perfectly good. What I'll do is group this into this cylinder here for now, and I'll zero it out along the X and along the Z actually for now. We've got to make an adjustment along the Z axis anyway, but that's fine. We can then think about aiming it in the direction of our joint here, and then move it, and we can make some adjustment on that if we need to, which of course we do. It also needs to be adjusted in the length, which is fine. So let's just adjust this until we get it in around the right place. Let's just move it up somewhere around here. That should be okay. Let's just adjust its length. So we'll just make that 49.5. That should be okay, I would think. I mean, again, we can do this by eye. It doesn't have to be that pedantic. I mean, obviously, if you want to precision engineer this, you certainly can. But it should be okay if we just hit O so that we can see where we are. Yeah, I mean, it's not far off, is it? It actually looks quite good. I think it's not in a bad position. If we wish to, we could just simply make that 49 just to bring it in slightly if we wanted to. But I think 49.5 is actually better, so we'll leave it there. I'm going to go with that, actually. I think that will work fine. So that's the profile for our first arm. If we just go into our top view, so F2, we can see that we're in a reasonably good shape here. We're okay. The only thing I would say is that we might need to make some adjustments on the positions of our joints here. So let's just see where we are. We want this. Yeah, I'm just thinking about where we want this. I think we want this certainly in line with the edge of this. So we need to bring this somewhere in here. Again, I don't need to do this with absolute precision at this. It really isn't that important to do that. We can just bring that forward to there. And then the rectangle here, we'll just remove that from there for now. We can just bring this forward. And again, just about to the edges of the two here. And then we can think about dropping this into an extrude. It's going to be way too long. We want it something like 1 or even 0.5, I think will be fine. That's 5 millimeters, which is quite a sturdy bar. So yeah, 5 millimeters is absolutely fine. and we'll leave that as it is. I think that's okay. So our first bar is now in place, and we can see that that's fitting quite nicely there. The next thing we need to do then is probably think about making the crossbar that goes between these two. We'll make that, and then to finish off we can just make the two arms that go between here and between here and here, and we'll do that next. What I'll also do, I've got to really make this, if we look at our coordinates, the same as the position Z of 1L, because that dimension there is important. So let's just put that in there and make them the same, and now they should be aligned, and they are. That's great, that's nice. In my front view, hit H, what we'll do now then is bring in another rectangle. In fact, what I can do, let's just copy this one. I don't want 1R, just copy this one. What we'll do is zero that out, and we can bring this up here, put it in about the middle of the two there, and then all we've got to do is adjust its length until it fits. And it's a little too big, so let's just go somewhere there and just move this along. It wants to go a little bit more, so let's make this 53. Yeah, and 53 should be fine, and we can just move that up until it's just about in line with that, and that should be fine for that. I think that will work okay. Hit F2 again to go into our top view, and we'll just move this over here by eye until it's just about there. And once again we can drop this into an extrude, make it 0.5, and there you go, we've got our second bar. And that's great, that's all working beautifully. So that's set up for us. Another thing I'll do actually with these extrudes, I'll just command click to select both of them, and in the caps we'll just add a little bit of rounding. We'll say 0.1 on both of those. In fact, we could even go 0.05, you know. Let's go 0.05, just so that they've got a little bit on them, just to make them a little bit prettier. Yeah, all looking nice. Okay then, so let's see where we are here. Yep, that's all looking good, and all we now need to do is put the two cross members in here, or the two arms I suppose, that are going to make the windscreen wipers actually move. We just need to build those. That's where we need to go from here, just to finish the actual build off. Once again, I'll hit F4 to give us our front view, and this time I'm going to bring in a new rectangle, group it into base L, and zero it out. And then we can work with its dimensions. So we'll make the width 4 and the height 3. And we will give it rounding, and that's fine. We just hit O for object, and then we can just zoom out a little bit so that we can see where we are. We can now hit C to make the rectangle editable, and we can take it out of base L now. The next thing we can do is select these points at the top and the bottom, hold down the control key and subdivide, and that just gives us an extra point between them, which will be useful to us. Select all of these points, and it's important that you have visible only checked off here, because if we check it on and we click on this, we've only actually selected one point. There are 2 points here, so we've got to be a little bit careful. I'm not going to get rid of the second point for this. I'm just going to select both of them and both of these, and I'm going to draw these out somewhere over here, to the just beyond where we think they might need to be. Next, I'll select my rotation tool. The position needs to be object. It's actually on object. It could be selected, but it's on object, and that's where we need it to be, because I want to rotate these around this point. So they're a little bit further out than they need to be, aren't they? Well, that's not a problem. All we need to do is grab a hold of our move tool and change this to selected, and then we can just move these up until they're somewhere around there. That'll do nicely. Moving on from here then, we can select all of these. Once again, we're going to rotate. We'll do it around the object. And this time we're going to bring these just up about that much. We don't need to go far. And then all we can do to finish this off, we'll just go back to selected for what it is. We'll just move these along until we've got them somewhere around there. That'll do nicely. So you can line them up with sort of the inner edge of the crossbar. And that looks good. That's going to work for us, I think. Great. So we're sorted there. The next thing we can do is drop this rectangle into an extrude. So I'll hold down my option key, drop it into an extrude. Once again, we want the offset to be 0.5. In our caps, we want 0.1 for the rounding. And if we go into our 3D view, so F1, we can see what we've got, and that's looking good. Now what I'm going to do is just draw this forward so that it's about there. And then all I need to do next is copy, so command drag, copy one of these out, and then drop this into base R. And what we can do here is go into our coordinates, zero this out, and that's all we need to do. The Z can stay the same because it's already in line. So that's great. That's set those two up and they're ready to go for us. Just remove this from here. So where are we going next? Well, all we need to do to finish this off is to create our windscreen wiper blades, and that's what we're going to do now. In order to achieve this, I'm just going to grab a cube. I'll make it 60 by 0.5 by 2. And that gives us a basic shape for a windscreen wiper blade. That's exactly what we need. We'll also fillet it, and we'll make the fillet 0.05 just to give it a little bit of a prettier sort of look. And then what we need to do is bring this over to our arm, and we need to rotate it into position. So F4 for our front view once again, and let's just do a rotate on this, see if we can get it in the right place. Now it looks to me as if I'm going to have to do a little bit of adjustment on the actual arm, which is fine. I can do that. What I'll do is just bring that up till it's somewhere around the middle. I mean, it doesn't really matter, but you know, this, I don't know though, we can probably get away with that actually. But if you need to, what we can do is just make a slight adjustment with the rotation. It might have been rotated just a little bit too much on those last few points. So let's just go into, where are we? It's going to be this one, isn't it? If we go back to our rotate tool, what we can do is just bring those down a little bit until they kind of aligned with, or where this is aligned with these two edges. As long as they're just about parallel with each other, it should be fine. So just do it again just until we get it just about in the correct place. I think that'll be okay. I'll have to do the same with the other one, of course, which we can do, and there'll be a little bit of a discrepancy between them, but that's all right. That's no problem. So we can get a hold of our cube now, and we can move it into the center of the arm. So let's just bring that down until it's about there. I think that should be okay. Let's just zoom out a little bit. Yeah, I think that's going to work okay. Top view, and then we can bring this back so that it's just inside the arm. That should be okay. Yeah, I think we'll go with that. And then all I've got to do is select my world coordinates, and then I'll command drag a copy of this out until it's over here. And that should be fine. That gives us both our blades. Let's hit H so that we can see everything. Again, I'll go back into, get rid of that, go back into my front view object so that I can see where cube 1 is. And then all I'm going to do here is, once again, with the rectangle in Extrude 3, if I grab a hold of my rotate tool, it's already set up. I can then just rotate these until they're in the correct place. which is around there. So yeah, that's all good. It all looks pretty good to me anyway. I think it's going to work okay. So that completes the actual build for this. We don't need to do anything more. It's going to be a case of setting the rig up next, and we're going to be using some Expresso and of course some IK. So that's where our next step will take us. I'm just going to change the display to garage shading lines and isopalms because I think that gives us a nicer look. Before we go too much further, what we've got to do is make this cylinder editable. So we'll hit C. We've got to do the same with all of these, just make them editable. And the reason we're going to do this is because we're going to move their axes, because we've got to align them all. Because at the moment, if we look at our top view, just zoom out so that we can see everything here. So this is our cylinder here. This is the cylinder. And then we've got base L and 1L. So all of those elements are there. Now, if we just go back into object mode, or rather model mode, I should say. If we go back into model mode and we just select our move tool, we can see what's going on. If we select base L as well, we can see we've got axes here, we've got axes here. And if we select our cylinder, command to select the cylinder, we've got another axis here, and none of them are aligned. So we've got to do something about that. And what we'll do is select the cylinder first, we'll put snapping on, and we will align the axis up. If we select axis mode, we'll align the axis up with this line, this grid line here. And we'll do the same with the others. So let's see where we are over here. Select base L. So this object, its axes are going to actually be outside of it, which is rare. We don't do that often, but that's something we need to do in this on this occasion. And we need to just align this one up if we can. Let's just move it. So let's move it down and then leave it there. It should be okay, I think, there. I think it's in the correct place. Yes, it is. That's fine. So now we can see that we've got all of these aligned correctly. Those two are perfectly in line. And if we command select our cylinder, we can see that that's correct as well. Let's just go down here. Yep, there we go. And we've got our axes all aligned perfectly. That's nice. So this is going to work. So moving on from here, then we can think about creating our first IK chain, which is going to be driving our left windscreen wiper. So let's see what we can do here. Well, base L, we can give this a rigging tag and it will be the IK tag. So we've got base L and we've got this in here. And then of course up here we will have a target. We're going to need to put a null at this point here. So let's grab a hold of a null and we'll call this T1 or TL actually. Let's call it TL. And we'll place it in here. We'll actually transfer it to, let's have a look, so we're going into our top view. We're going to transfer it to over here. So we need to actually drop it first into our cylinder and then zero it out. And now it's in the correct place and we can drop it back into 1L. We can then say that we want this to be the end, and we can see that we've got our line here, which is telling us that this is actually set up, but we've got to add a goal. So we'll add a goal. So we've got TL goal. And if we get a hold of this goal and we move it, we can see that things are starting to happen. This joint is rotating around this in the correct way. So that's already starting to work. We can take the snapping off for a second. But obviously at the moment we haven't got the arms set up as we need them to be. So that's the next step. Before we go any further though, let's just do a little bit of renaming. So this is going to be arm L. and this will be arm R. So we've got those renamed, and then our extrudes, we've got this and the cross brace there. So what we'll call this one then, I'll call this driver arm, and this one just cross brace, that'll do, or crossbar, that will be fine, I think. Okay, so we know what everything is. So arm L will need to be dropped into base L. That can be dropped in there, and also we've got Q, which is going to be our wiper, so we'll call that wiper L. We'll rename this one wiper R. Okay, so we've got the wiper, we've got the arm. Now in 1L we need the driver arm, so we'll drop that into 1L, just above the rectangle there, just to make sure, or rather that needs to drop into there. That's it, so that's fine. And then the TL is fine, the target is there. So that's all set up as it needs to be. And if we move the goal now, we should find that we do start to get the kind of motion that we'd expect, which we do. Now the goal has got to be controlled by the position of this cylinder. So our cylinder, which is in the driver, so that's got to be the one that's going to be controlling TL. So what we can do is add a null, rename it Expresso, give it an Expresso tag, and we're ready to start work. All I need to do is drag in my cylinder. At the output stage, global position, that's all we need in there. Oops, let's make that bigger so that we can see what we're doing. And then all I need to do from here is drag in TL goal, coordinates, position, global position. Connect the two. And now if I move my driver, let's just rotate it, we should see, if we deselect our axes, we should see that we do start to get the motion that we want. So that's working exactly as it needs to. And that's all you need to do with the Expresso with this. It's none of this is difficult really. It's very, very simple Expresso. Okay then, so moving on from here, we've got to think about working out what we're going to do with our crossbar and moving our right windscreen wiper. As we did previously, we must align base R and 1R. The axes are not in the correct places, so let's just switch to our top view, so F2 once again, and get a little bit closer to these and see whether we can find a point of alignment. And we certainly can, so let's just select our axis tool and switch back to the snapping. Select the move tool, and what we'll do is just drop this down. It's not doing what I want it to. Let's just drop that down to there. That's where it needs to be. So it's aligned with this line. If we select base R, drop this down just about to there and just pull that down to there. Now the two should be aligned if we select them, and we can see that they're sharing that common line. Now moving on from here, to set up our end point of this, which will be over here, we've actually got to bring in another null. So we'll bring this in, and this null needs to be grouped into 1L. So we'll group it here, and then we can zero it out along the X and along the Y, and then we can place it in the correct position along the Z axis. We've got the snapping on. Let's just zoom in a bit. We can see where it's got to go. It's got to go on this line. So let's just drop this down somewhere near there and then drop it to there, and now it will be aligned in the correct place. Okay, at least I think so. It might be the next line actually. I think it is. Yeah, I've got to go one more line, so let's just, yeah, because it's got to be within this bar. This is the crossbar, so it's got to be within that, and that's fine, that's okay. So that's everything aligned correctly and set up to give us our IK chain. So let's think about what we can do next. So with base R, we know that we've got to put this windscreen wiper in there for a start. We've also got to drop arm R beneath it, so that's the first part of it set up. And then with the 1R here, we can drop the crossbar into there. And then the null here is going to be the end point of it. That being the case, what we need to do is select this null and actually command drag to create a copy of it. And we need to drop this into our 1R and then place it there. So this is now TR. And that's ready to go. And then all we've got to do is set up our IK chain as we did before. So we'll select base R, tags, rigging tags, IK. TR will be the end, and straight away we get the line that tells us we've got it set up correctly. So the line's coming from our root through to the end. And we can add another goal, and we've got TR goal. Moving on from here then, Expresso, tags, and we're ready to go again. So we can bring in this null, global position, and TR goal, global position, connect them up. And we should, all things being fair, if we move our driver now, just turn off our axis tool and snapping, we get the result that we want. Look at that, it works. How fantastic is that? So yeah, we've set it up, we've made it work. And that's all you've got to do. But if you think about it, you can probably see that we may have a bit of an issue. What I'm going to do before we finish, because this is not ended yet, I'm going to just go out and add another Expresso tag. Now, let's have a look at this one. So that one should actually be there. I'm going to add one more, programming tags Expresso. That is the first one. It should be, that's the first, it's where it should be. Now what I'm going to do is come into my system presets, animation and time, rotate, bring this in, and then I'm going to simply bring in the driver, and it will be rotation B. So coordinates rotation B, and connect this like that. Now let's see where we are. And if we run this now, it works. It just does the job. What I'll do is give it 300 frames, and then we can run and it will loop fine. So that's all working exactly the way we think it should. But you can see that there's a lag problem. It's not quite correct, is it? So how do we solve the lag problem in this instance? Well, we've got our three expressions, 1, 2 and 3. They are actually moving in the correct order, or they're being looked at in the correct order, but they're not placed correctly. Now normally you would think you might go into here and start playing around in here, or maybe playing around with this. You may also think you might do the same in here, but you don't need to do any of that. All of this can be left alone. No, what we need to do, we need to rename this Expresso 1, bring in 2 more, and call them Expresso 2 and Expresso 3. Just rearrange them. So this can be Expresso 2 and this can be Expresso 3. And then we've got to place them. So we'll close up base L and we'll close up base R. Expresso 1 can be left above the driver. Expresso 2 needs to be placed above base L. It needs to be placed above there. We'll just close that driver up a minute. And we also need to place Expresso 3 above base R. And now everything is set up the way it needs to be. And if we run this now, we find that it actually does work and everything marries up and there's no lag problem anymore. So that's how you solve that one in this instance. And now everything is working beautifully. So that is how you go about creating windscreen wipers, or a rig, I should say, for windscreen wipers. Fine, all fine and dandy. So yeah, it all looks beautiful. It all works perfectly. And that's looking really nice. However, there is still one slight problem, isn't there? Because as you can no doubt see, we do have an issue with collision. You can clearly see, if we just change the view, you can clearly see that it's going through itself. Now, we can correct that, actually. That's not that difficult to correct. All we've got to do is move the driver. If we just pick that up and we move it, we just got to place it in the scene differently. That's all you've got to do. If you get a problem like that, just move it. It's as simple as that. And it will sort the problem out. So now when we play, the wipers go a little bit further, and that's still okay. Perhaps what we might need to do is just move it slightly over to the right. Let's have a look, make sure that's great, it's remaining smooth. And that's all you've got to do. If you need to make a little bit of adjustment, it's fine. It works perfectly. And then just to finish this off, all we need to do is, well, what we'll do first is bring a null on there, grab all of these, drop them into the null, and we can call that windscreen wipers. Okay, and then with this, you can place it anywhere in the scene and it will work, because everything is done with global positions. So there's absolutely no problem whatsoever with moving it around. All works fine. Fabulous. Okay. And there you go. That's how you create a windscreen wiper rig. So, as I always say, I really hope you've enjoyed this tutorial and it's been useful to you and you've learned some stuff that you can use in your own projects. And if you have enjoyed the video, then please give it a like, and if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel, and of course leave a comment and ring the bell. And wherever you happen to be on social media, please share this video, because all this good stuff really does help keep the channel moving in the right direction. But anyway, that brings the curtain down on this one, so I'll see you very soon on the next tutorial.